Hi there, you're welcome to yet another edition of Dissecting Africa. This is a program through which we bring issues, positive issues affecting the continent to your viewing pleasure. I remain Kazim Balugu. And on today's edition, we want to look at a kind of Africa. We're looking at the sit-tight mentality of African leaders. But before we delve into that discussion, let's take the news make around in Africa. And we start with these headlines, which have to do with what we want to discuss as well. The first one says Somalia's parliament extends president term after election disputes. That's what we are talking about. The president there intends to extend his own period in power. This is what we're talking about. Another headline says 34 migrants dead after boat capsized off Djibouti, and African Union praises Chad's peaceful in court presidential elections. What we're still going to discuss. And in Benin Republic, the headline says ballots counted and votes were opposition sidelined. Moving on, let's get to Cairo. The headline from Cairo says COVID-19 doesn't stop Ramadan traditions as shoppers eat Cairo markets. And another story from Egypt says 3,000-year-old lost city found in Egypt. Then let's get to Ghana. The airline says Ghana to host Twitter's first African office. And on the last note, the headline says Uganda, Tanzania sign oil pipeline agreement. So that's about the headline news. Now let's delve into the nitty gritty of our discussion today. Like I said, we want to look at the six-tight syndrome, which is affecting African leaders. We know that so many African leaders in the past um, sat down, in power. They remained in power until they were booted out. We are all students of history. We know what transpired, in those places. We know of Mobutu Sese Seko of the then Zaire. He was booted out. He started running out scatter to different parts of the world before he died. The same thing we know about Muammar Gaddafi, even though his own was a kind of politically motivated, by those that don't even seem to like him. But the truth remains that he remained too long in power. Then we know of Omar Bashar of Sudan. He remained in power until he was booted out by the military and civilians. We know of Hosni Mubarak. He was booted out as well. And in the recent time, we get to hear even we know that there are some other African leaders that are still in power. We know of Paul Biya of Cameroon. We know of even in the recent time, or the name the president of Cote d'Ivoire, Alassane Ouattara. He served the first term, second term, and he still remained in power. We currently, like the headline that I read about the president of Somalia, he changed the constitution. He wants to run for another term, and the parliament has agreed to that. We know that election is being counted in Benin Republic. The president of Benin Republic was meant to spend just a term, that's 5 years, but he tried to remain in power. The result will determine what happens next. And we know of the president of Togo, Foreign Nasigbe. He remained in power, after his father stayed in power and he died on the throne. He took over. He's still there, election after election, he remained in power, in absolute power. And even um, many of us thought that President Paul Kagame of Rwanda um, had these wonderful administration when it comes to what is happening in Rwanda, in terms of development and the way he handled the country. But the truth remains that he is not the only person that can be in that position. He should have made arrangement with other people so that he will find a way, to transition to a peaceful transition of power to younger ones or his peers that can lead the country to the next level. He might be a state man, being somewhere, giving directions. Because the reason why we are saying this is that we now have a situation whereby most African countries are not developing. This is one of the reasons. When we have many of our leaders coming to power and thinking about the remaining in power perpetually, a situation like this, we hamper development because we have, you know, many intellectuals, many individuals that can steer the leadership, but we have a situation whereby just few of them think that they can just remain in power, be there controlling everything while it affects the generality. This is why development is very, very slow in Africa. If we can have a situation whereby any leader that comes in does his own for term, 4 years a term, or 5 years a term, it goes away. Another person comes in because we have so many people that can do it. And the beautiful thing about the fact that if they come and spend just a term, it will help development. You know why? They know that all they need to do within a term, maybe 5 years or 4 years, they will be able to do it. Not thinking about, having a second term, not even thinking about an extension. Look at what we are experiencing in Somalia. The president of Somalia requested for an extension of his term. This is what happens. They will have signed to serve a term, but after tasting power, like what Abraham Lincoln said, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Once they taste the power, they want to remain there. If care is not taken, they remain there as long as they can. I just cited different examples of how so many of them remain in power. Imagine counting presidents of years, 20 years, 30 years, 35 years. We all know the story of Robert Mugabe before he was booted out. Though one of the finest presidents you can ever think of. But the truth remains that there are so many ways you can go about doing whatever you want to do rather than remaining in power. You can never remain in power. Even if you want to, when it is time for you to relinquish, you relinquish. But why not relinquish when it is the ovation is loudest? Look at what happened to Robert Mugabe. He ought to have relinquished power before he was booted out. We all know the story of Dr. Nelson Mandela. If he wanted to remain in power perpetually, he had the chance because he suffered for this democracy that South Africa is enjoying now. But what a fine thing to so he served a term and he relinquished the power to his colleagues in ANC, and that the way it has been. Africans, we need to rise up to the occasion. We need to let our leaders know that remaining in power will not bring about accelerated development that we need. We can really meet up with the likes of Europe and America. Nothing stops that. We started with countries like Malaysia. Malaysia can meet up with Europe and America. There are some European countries that can never be compared with what Malaysia is doing. We can do all this. In Africa, we need to have a rethink about who becomes our leader. From Nigeria to Egypt, we're not even talking about the military interventions. Those ones we all know that they always have this mindset of being in power perpetually. And we have to give it to them. We've seen a series of them, you know, transferring power. But what are we even thinking when we say we are practicing democracy? Is this how democracy should be practiced? When you agree to a term, maybe 4 years or 5 years, at the end of the day, you manipulate the national, the other politicians, the other government entities. You manipulate them, you bribe them, you coerce them to extend your tenure so that you can remain in power perpetually. An attempt of that was made by the former president Olusegun Obasanjo in Nigeria, but that didn't see the light of the day. That is how people of Africa should rise up. Let's have a kind of discussion about how the leadership should be. We don't want a situation whereby we'll have our leaders remain in power perpetually. They don't have two heads, and after all, we voted them. Even though if they think that our votes don't even count, but we can make our votes count by ensuring that they stick to whatever agreement that we have with them. They should not think of remaining in power. Once they get to power, they want to remain there because they believe absolute power corrupts absolutely. I share that thought because once you remain in power, you want to remain there. And all those countries where we have leaders being in power, you see underdevelopment. Go and check it out. You see underdevelopment because you find the same person, repeating the same thing, and the country is now moving forward. But when there are ways you change power, maybe a term or two terms, way of determining, of judging. When leaders remain perpetually in power, it destroys the economy. They think they can be there forever and ever, and they wouldn't want to leave because they've tasted power. And once you taste power, it corrupts you. You get used to it. You want to remain there. You don't want the situation whereby you go back to where you be answerable because they believe that they have the absolute power. So for Africans, I have a belief that we need to find a way, to go about doing this, to ensure that our leaders, stay in government for the period they signed for. Nothing should change that. We should find a kind of mechanism to ensure that they stay in power for the numbers of a period that they signed for. Even if they want to come back, they need to relinquish after serving the term. Well, I hope I've been able to pass the message across on today's edition of Dissecting Africa. Why not join me again next week as I bring another interesting edition of the program to your viewing pleasure. I remain Kazim Balogun. Bye bye for now.